This is Linux in Laws, a podcast on topics around free and open source software, any associated contraband, communism, the revolution in general, and whatever else fancies your tickle. Please note that this and other episodes may contain strong language, offensive humor, and other certainly not politically correct language. You have been warned. Our parents insisted on this disclaimer. Happy, Mum? Thus, the content is not suitable for consumption in the workplace, especially when played back on a speaker in an open plan office or similar environments. Any minors under the age of 35, or any pets, including fluffy little killer bunnies, your trusted guide dog, unless on speed, and cute T-Rexes or other associated dinosaurs.
Welcome to Linux in Laws, Season 1, Episode 72. Martin, how are things today?
Oh, things, yes. Interesting. Well, we just heard the annexation of various territories up in the east.
Or as in space, the final frontier? That wasn't
not quite that high up, but yeah. Yes. You are aware of the recent developments in...
I'm living under a rock, Martin. Please fill me in. Yes.
Okay. Well, there have been some, let's say, not elections, but referendums in.
Oh, you mean the rigged stuff?
Hmm?
You mean the rigged stuff?
Rigged.
Yeah, as in
rigged. Rigged.
Manipulated. Yes.
Well, who knows? Who knows? Surely all this is done completely done above board and legally. But, yeah.
I reckon I know quite a few people who beg to differ.
Yes, I expect so.
The UNO, for example, being one of them, or quite a few people actually.
The what?
The UNO. United Nations Organization.
Oh, you mean UN?
Yes, exactly. The end, exactly. That's so.
Commonly referred to as the UN, people.
Exactly.
Don't worry about the old part.
In case you got confused like myself, exactly.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Anyway.
It would be interesting because I mean, I'm almost tempted to say I see Vladimir's point, because if it's really that part then of Russia.
Hang on. You see Vladimir's point? What?
Yeah, Vladimir put no. I mean, from his crazy perspective, it does make sense.
Oh yes, of course, yes. Because it is a very clever tactic. Yes.
Agreed. Whether that checks out finally remains to be seen. History books in about 10 years will probably tell you, but maybe not. I do not know.
Mm-hmm.
But apart from that, well, it remains to be seen.
It does. But yes, as you say, it's a clever ruse to then claim any, let's say, attack on these regions to be a war on Russia.
But this is not the war podcast.
Is it not?
No, it's not, Martin.
Oh, right, okay.
No, Martin, coming back to a much more pleasant...
We could talk about open source in war.
No, but before we do that, how is life in Birmingham these days? Sorry, close to Birmingham.
Oh, we're going back to the weather podcast.
Yeah. Okay, so... Maybe. No, I mean, just outside Birmingham, because you don't live in Birmingham, for the people who are interested in that sort of thing. Martin lives secluded.
Birmingham in the UK, not in Alabama.
Exactly.
For those US listeners.
Yes. No, in the somewhat United Kingdom, with Charlie now at the helm.
Well, interestingly, we actually now have a king, so it is actually a kingdom again. Even though it was always called a kingdom, it's now actually a kingdom.
I can't recall that country to be called a United Queendom, for that matter.
It should have been, really, shouldn't it? But anyway, it doesn't really matter.
So that means you all have to change the banknotes and coins and stuff.
Well, you don't have to change them. They will introduce some new ones, I'm sure. Okay. Stamps, that kind of stuff, right?
So, Royal Mint, if you're listening, get cracking.
Yeah, well, they probably had these plans in reserve for some time, I would imagine.
I see.
It's not a kind of ad hoc operation, right?
Okay, fair enough.
These things happen, so be prepared, people.
And on that subject... Exactly, be prepared. Prepared that the level of preparedness that we normally exhibit. Let's get on with today's topic of today's show.
What are you saying here, Chris? Exactly.
Martin had this brilliant idea of suggesting an episode on messaging and streaming, and for a reason. And yes, Martin will explain that in a minute.
What, the reason that we needed an episode? No?
Exactly.
Oh, was that another reason you're thinking?
No.
Okay.
No, so Martin came up with the idea of doing an episode on streaming messaging, and of course, being a co-host, I had to plow along. For want of a better expression.
Tag along.
So exactly, so Martin will probably do much of the talking today, in contrast to ordinary episodes. Maybe, maybe not. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
We shall see.
Okay, so Martin, why did you get us started with then? Why is messaging and streaming that important?
Well,
and
okay.
maybe also a little bit of history on this
Yeah,
one.
sure. Okay, so if you imagine, let's say, your battlefield in the 1700s,
Now we're getting somewhere.
and you want to, you're being attacked from all directions, and you need some reinforcements. What are you going to do, right? You don't have a mobile phone. You don't
Get
have
out the nukes.
They didn't have nukes. then either.
Sorry, I got the timing wrong.
Yes, 1700s, 1600s.
Okay.
Beforehand, right? So, no, they used to use pigeons, right? Pigeons, yes, with messages.
Carrier pigeons.
Carrier pigeons.
Ah,
those ones.
okay,
Yes.
okay.
Hence the name carrier. Yes.
Ah, I see where you go with this.
So these pigeons used to carry
Yes.
messages
Excellent, excellent. Well done.
to get from, to get some communication from one place to another, which
So what happened if a heron got in between, or a pigeon got lost, or
backup
whatever?
pigeon.
Okay, fair enough.
Make sure you have a backup pigeon, people.
And what happened if that pigeon then also got lost or got stuck in a pub or
Well,
something?
then you're on your own, really, aren't you?
Fair enough. So that's the war sorted then.
So yeah, so the original reliability of messages had
I
some
see.
flaws in the plan. Anyway, moving on to more modern times.
So I think the main takeaway is actually if you deploy carrier pigeons, make sure that there are no alcoholics among them,
Yes, you want to make sure that they know where they're going. Yeah,
and bulletproof vests probably do help too. Or armor for that matter, so they don't get attacked by birds of prey.
Yes. Well, they might still get attacked, but yeah. Anyway, they're more likely to survive.
Fit them out with firearms.
Well, that's a good idea. Yeah. Okay.
But then they could help with the war, no?
Anyway,
Or
this
with the battle.
is one way of getting a message through.
Very true. Yes.
Other tried and tested methods are things like flags and lights, right, over long distances, and you can signal stuff with flags, which we also have in computers.
Yes. Is that the reason why the English got beaten quite a few times? Because the fog came in between stuff, so that you couldn't see the flags and what was happening.
Not sure. They were pretty handy in some wars, I have to say. Waterloo comes to mind. Napoleon, if you're listening, and
Yes.
so
Water under the bridge, as they say in England. That's where.
various others. But yes, this is the thing with wars, right? They can be won or lost depending on
True, very true.
circumstances.
Yes.
If you're listening, Vladimir, yeah.
Okay, moving on to more recent times.
Yes. Okay. Right. More recent time, people invented the postal system to
be covered in a
relay messages.
as covered in Tara Pritchett novel
Again, so
called the Postal Service or something like this?
prior to telephones, which give you more real-time communication, you had asynchronous communication, right? This is the point of sending messages. You send it, and then you hope it arrives, and someone may send a reply if they get around to it a few weeks later.
If at all.
Yes. Unlike, say, a telephone where you have instant communication.
But that came later.
That came later, yes.
Because that required electricity.
It did. Well, I guess before that, there was all things like the old Morse code thing. What do you call that?
Telegraph.
Yankee, yes, that one, yes. Telegraph, yes. Not the modern telegraph. But the original telegraph.
Yes, but that required electricity
Morse
too,
code.
no?
Yes.
Indeed.
Yes, so, yeah.
So moving on.
Yeah.
Exactly, moving on, then these things called computers were invented.
Yes.
We're talking now the 50s or maybe 40s of the last century.
Yeah, you take your pick, right? There's various definitions of when computers started, but it doesn't really matter. Anyway, computers as we know it, yes. Mm-hmm.
So with these computers came software, as in so-called programs.
And with computers then came computers having to speak to computers.
Exactly.
Or
and programs...
also within computers or on computers themselves, programs have to speak to each other,
yes,
etc. And like with the let's say the post and the telephone example, you can
Yes.
do this synchronous or asynchronous. Right?
Exactly.
That's,
And then some damn fool invented the cat video network, also known as the internet. Mobile came shortly afterwards, and then this whole mess started to surface. as in applications having to talk to other applications on the other side of the planet.
You don't mean the cat video, no?
No. and doing this actually in real time. And then some crazy companies came up with the idea of making money from this, and the rest is history. Thank you for listening. No, okay, going back to a much more serious approach now. So, what are some of the use cases in terms of why applications have to communicate in a scalable and preferably real-time manner?
Well, this is the it's not so much about if we ignore the real time part. The main thing first to decide if you need synchronous or asynchronous communication, right?
Correct.
Do you need an immediate reply or an immediate action on a certain signal trigger event, right?
Or do you need a reply at all?
Yeah. Or do you need an action to be taken?
Exactly. Yes.
As when the event occurs, or can that wait? Can the reply wait? Can the any triggered action wait? So these are the two. Obviously, if we're talking about synchronous, that requires communication channels, right?
Yes.
Established communication channels, and
Also, the number of generators as in senders of messages and receivers of messages come into play. For example, there's a use case where only one program will generate a message that is then picked up by many receiving applications.
fan out principle. Yes.
Exactly.
So yeah, but to the point, if you want synchronous communication, you have to maintain this channel, like with your telephone call, right? You have to keep that connection open and keep talking backwards and forwards. If you to go back to the telephone analogy, if you just want to send someone a message, you use your SMS, or you use your WhatsApp, or you use your Element or whatever, and then it may be so. In this case, it's just communication. Fine. Obviously, in applications, you may want to take an action based on the message you receive, and then deciding you have to decide: do I need to take immediate actions, or does that original event need to be acted on immediately? And you probably want to choose synchronous. If you are expecting, if it is a less life critical situation, then you may go for asynchronous communication and let the let's say the consumer deal with the message at its own pace. But yeah, your scalable part is part of it, right? You may your consuming side may be a lot slower than your producing side,
yes.
right? So you
Or vice versa.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean, if you think about video streams, frames are easily produced, a bunch of bytes. Determining if there's a bunch of cats in this frame is a more complex or more time-consuming operation. So therefore, you may want to scale your number of consumers on that side to make sure that you keep up with your cat counting.
Exactly, and also taking into account that the transport medium may or may not be reliable.
Yes.
So that you have actually error conditions where some of your messages disappear.
But you don't want your messages to disappear.
No, but sometimes that happens. So
No, it doesn't.
No, it
You
does.
choose the right terminology. What is this? we get up to the technology bit in a
So
minute.
exactly. So
people, choose the right technology.
Exactly. So don't use the internet.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
or don't use the Royal Mail. Yeah.
Exactly. No, I mean
Deutsche
the
Post.
point. The point that I'm making is actually applications especially on the receiving side, have to be able to deal with error situations. In terms of that they're expecting something, but that doesn't come through. So what's going to happen then?
Yes, there's three parts of the. There's the producing side, the bit in the middle, and then the consuming side. So in each of these parts, you need to decide when can something get broken, and then deal with it at the appropriate place.
Absolutely, yes.
For example, in technology called RabbitMQ, you can have publisher confirms, which means that when the RabbitMQ will send a confirmation back that I have it, publisher, fine, you don't have to do any thing on your side anymore. From now on, I'm taking care of it, right? So you're handing off the responsibility of that message along the chain from...
Now, RabbitMQ is a messaging system, is a streaming service. What's the difference?
It's so RabbitMQ was originally a messaging service. They introduced streaming as well a couple of years ago.
What do you mean by what?
Yeah.
Sorry,
we'll get to the details.
Okay, go ahead.
Just a bit of sort of context that RabbitMQ was originally a messaging broker. In the end, into streaming, because streaming is has a number of advantages, which we'll get to. Redis did the same, right? They introduced streaming as well. Obviously, Kafka came along, and so on and so on. So, what's the difference? Okay. Do you want me to take this one?
Please, by all means. Okay. I mean, you're the messaging and streaming expert between the two of us, so just go right ahead.
I wouldn't say expert, but I can talk about these things.
Exactly.
That's fine. So, okay. So the point about with messaging, what we are thinking about is something that is, let's say, temporal. The message is produced, it is transferred, and it is consumed. The broker in the middle, once it's dealt with its consumption from the producing side and passed it on to the consumer, that's it, it's gone. We don't care about it anymore as a messaging broker, like Royal Mail, right? It sits in the middle, gets a letter, delivers it, fine, it's not going to keep these letters, right? It's...
In the ideal case, yes.
unless they are not delivered at all, but yeah.
7 points.
Slight implementation flawed. So the difference with streaming is that with streaming you keep all your messages to be able to play them back from certain points in times, and at the same time you keep a track of which consumer is where in my message stream. So if I have 10 data points and I have 4 consumers consuming these data points, then consumer 1 may have had the first 3, the consumer 2 may have, but the point is that all these messages are important, all these data points are important to all these consumers, and they want to be able to have them. And also, if they, for whatever reason, go down in a, let's say a remote situation, right? You have a piece of kit somewhere remotely, connection goes down on Mars or whatever. They need to be able to reconnect and say, give me the messages up to here, because that's where the last messages I had from you, right? So whereas in a let's say a messaging situation, if nobody is listening to a message, then it's either delivered or not. If they're not, nobody's listening. And same as pops up in Redis, right? If nobody's listening,
yes,
it goes,
it's best effort, and that actually takes us to a very important differentiation between these two, between the different approaches, because sometimes the sending application just wants to hand off a message to the broker, for want of a better expression, and then don't care whether it's going to be delivered, whether it's going to be dropped, or whether it has to be redelivered and all the rest of it. Now, for the application on the receiving side, and thus the status of the overall system, it's important to differentiate between kind of two semantic notions, for want of a better expression. I mean, for example, best effort means you fire and forget. That's just what Martin just explained. But on the other side, the application architecture has to do with that. So, for example, if you're sending a message...
okay.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Carry on. I mean, this is... the point of things like message brokers are that they take on a lot of that responsibility for you.
Yes.
So, sorry, carry on. I know where you were going with that. But
plus the fact is, I mean, for example, in certain scenarios, if you send a message twice, the result has to be the same. This is normally known as idempotency. Whatever way you pronounce it. So, if you send a message twice or once, it doesn't make a difference on the receiving side.
Yes. So take the example that again. Let's go with the RabbitMQ example. It doesn't really matter, but your RabbitMQ is ready to send a message to consumer, and then you can either, depending on the message importance, you want that acknowledgement that the consumer has received it, dealt with it. If RabbitMQ, for example, doesn't have that, and you choose that kind of message importance, it will resend it. So you're handing off some of that responsibility to the broker. But as you say, then the consumer application may have had it. We just don't know, right? The connection may have died in between. So as you say, rightly say, in the application part, you then have to take some provisions for that if it's an important message or
Indeed.
if there are dependencies on it.
And and in contrast to this, on the streaming side, you are probably not interested in the fact that every entity on the receiving side actually has received the message, in terms of you just want to hand it over to your streaming architecture, and then the streaming architecture, whatever is in between, will take care of the rest. So from a sender side, it's actually fire and forget, because you can rest assured that the architecture in between, as in your streaming broker or streaming entity, will take care of delivering the message to each and every receiver.
And the other important difference there is that with streaming, the consuming side is interested in all messages rather than... So take the example of a program that crashes, whatever, right? So it no longer is receiving messages, but then when it comes back online, the importance of the messages that happened up to that, from the point it went down to, let's say, now, is also important. It doesn't just need the current state. So therefore, this is the point of streaming, is that the history is kept, and it can process all the steps in between to now, even if it went offline in between. So, let's say, trades, a simple example, right? They still need to be executed, whether the consumer was down for a certain period or not. You still need to execute all the steps that happened up to now. Otherwise, you're just going to miss a bunch. So history is important with streaming. Messaging, you're more interested in the current state, and what happened before then, fine. That can be lost.
So you already mentioned some of the piece of software out there that are capable of providing such services. You mentioned RabbitMQ. You mentioned
Kafka is the main example on the streaming scenario.
Redis Streams, of course, come to mind.
Yes, Redis Streams is indeed.
So why don't we shed a little bit of light of the history of Kafka?
The history of Kafka.
Yes. As an example.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it some time ago.
I think it's 2012. Details may or may not in the show notes. There's this social media platform called LinkedIn. That was now it's Microsoft,
driven by messages, right?
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, for those two people in the audience who don't know what LinkedIn is, it's LinkedIn.com. Links will may or may not be in the show notes. In case of doubt, use your favorite search engine. The idea behind LinkedIn is actually it's probably fair to say it's a network for professionals, as in social media platform for professionals.
Yeah.
So,
although it's more recently turned into a job hunting platform or candidate hunting.
Well, it always has been, Martin. Now that the pressure is on, that aspect is more and more visible. Yes, correct. But the idea initially was similar to other platforms, to provide an exchange, for want of a better expression, on a global scale for professionals to exchange information, news, opinions, and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And with the vision of the founders of LinkedIn, they had global world domination at the very top of their list.
Okay.
So they needed...
Surprising.
Yeah, funny that, isn't it?
Where did they get that from? They must have been listening to that.
Exactly. No, jokes aside. With that sort of architecture, you need a broker that is capable of scale the architecture up and down as required, in terms of you want to make sure that you more or less, I wouldn't say instantly, but without much delay, you can deliver a message from A to B. Because, as an example, if I type in a message in a discussion forum on LinkedIn and it's 6 p.m. in Germany, there shouldn't be much delay in terms of more than a second or something like this for somebody in Maryland to pick this up and read this. Because at the end of the day, LinkedIn, among other things, is all about the interactive experience.
It is?
It is.
Okay.
LinkedIn, if you're listening, the email address is sponsor@linuxinlaws.eu.
I must have missed that bit.
Perhaps you got too many mails.
You normally get like so LinkedIn has built-in messaging, right? And but you normally get a notification on an email like 6 hours later or something like that. That is a bit of a
Blame your email provider.
no, it's not nothing to do with email provider. Yeah. So,
but this is where it comes from originally. Let's
Yeah.
put it this way. And so two people actually set out at LinkedIn to build such an architecture.
But it simply has to, like Facebook, it has a feed, right? So, and this feed has to be distributed to all people, and then
Yes.
you'll be able to pick up on this
Exactly,
feed at certain
yes.
points in time, depending on when they connect back to LinkedIn, right? So,
Correct.
so yeah, you have to, per consumer, per LinkedIn user, maintain what they've seen in that feed and stuff.
Similar to Facebook or other social media platforms,
exactly.
yes.
Yeah.
So, but the idea behind LinkedIn was actually not just keep it to a handful of users, but rather kind of to potentially billions of users. As in billions of headhunters stalking Martin Visser.
Yes, headhunters, stop being so annoying. I will not reply to you anyway.
So, no,
Unless you want to sponsor their podcast, that's fine.
fast forward about 1 or 2 years, these two engineers set out to form a company called Confluent. LinkedIn provided, I think, the first 2 financing rounds, and the rest is pretty much history. The product is called Kafka.
Yeah, well, Kafka
Still?
is the open source
Yes.
project. Yes.
And Confluent, of course, provides services, adapters, and other shenanigans around this, and tries to make money from it.
Yeah, I mean there were, of course, commercial messaging systems like TIBCO, etc. All these kind of commercial offerings were there as well. But we're talking about open source, so we're talking about Kafka, there were Redis Streams, RabbitMQ. Those are some of the main open source. Well, not the main. You know about the adoption of Kafka, right? It's pretty much the de facto streaming solution for many organizations, and except that they're now trying to be more than that and become a database. But we'll talk about that in the Kafka episode. So yes, going back to the original topic.
Messaging and streaming, exactly.
So yes, so LinkedIn or social media platforms are one example. Clearly, with something like RabbitMQ, we see a lot of IoT applications because it supports many different protocols like AMQP and MQTT or Stomp even for synchronous web messaging, stuff like that. However, yes, so examples are, you have a bunch of factories, you have a bunch of devices, you have your washing machine at home, you want to make sure that your messages from your washing machine end up on your mobile phone so that it's finished washing.
Excellent.
Or at what temperature it's currently running, all that kind of stuff, right? There are more sort of, in factories you have more control, so obviously you rely on accurate data, and particularly accurate data at one point in time, because that's what's important. If your machine is overheating, you want to know that rather than, it has overheated in the past. That's more of an analytics use case than a real-time control system.
But, okay, from a historical perspective, changing tack now a little bit, messaging, I'm tempted, is almost as old as computing itself, because, for example, in the olden mainframe days, you had something called MQ series. That goes back at least to at least back to the 80s or 70s even.
I don't know if you're familiar with Red Hat's MQ offering.
There's something too, right? Exactly, yes.
Yes, but that includes both Kafka and messaging as it on the one name. But yeah, again, it's just a bundle of stuff. There's clearly a need for both ways of communicating data.
I mean, given the fact that this requirement has been around for ages, you'll see actually also that functionality to some extent, not just in separate products like Redis or Kafka or RabbitMQ, but rather also if you take a very close look at some of the standard libraries that come with your ordinary programming language ecosystem. Yes. For example, especially in the era of multiprocessing, Rust knows something called signals. Golang has a similar abstraction called channels that allow multiple threads to communicate with each other. And with Python and other languages,
Python
you just
has multiprocessing
Yes.
as well with async notifications and stuff like that.
exactly.
Yeah.
So more often than not, even with C or C++, you get, I think, Boost has a similar abstraction built into this. So the point that I'm making here is actually, depending on use case, you don't have to resort to MQ-Series or Redis or Kafka.
Yeah, it's really about why do these technologies come about, because then you can hand off some of the responsibility to other technology rather than building
Yes.
it into your application side, right? And yes, libraries will support that functionality, but there's more work to be done for the programmer than just saying, "Well, shove a message in Kafka" or something like that.
I mean, but if you just want to exchange messages between different threads in one application, you don't have to resort to Kafka or something like this.
That'd be an interesting slow down of the whole process because it's not sure inter-process communication via Kafka. That's a novel use case.
Yeah, if you are under the impression that your architecture is way too fast, just go for RabbitMQ or Kafka or something else.
Cool. All right. So there's that.
Final thoughts?
Final thoughts. Final thoughts.
Or did we forget to cover anything?
Well, it's probably worth mentioning a little bit around we kind of glanced over Redis streams.
True.
Similar to...
But you see, Redis hasn't paid the bills, so...
They haven't?
No, the promotion stops here.
Okay.
Redis,
okay.
if you're listening,
Yes.
the email address is...
Yeah.
Well, you know this by now, right?
Yes.
No, jokes aside, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a common... I don't know how many discussions you had with people about Redis streams, but it's the same with RabbitMQ and streams, and everybody is always going to ask how does it compare to Kafka, right? Because that is the de facto standard pretty much in streaming data. But having said that, we had, even in my time at Redis, there are some use cases where Redis streams or RabbitMQ streams are perfectly suitable for the usage, as well as a simpler implementation, let's put it that way. With Kafka, you will always need to have a large cluster, and they still haven't got rid of what's his name, Zookeeper. So even though they
That's true, yes.
wrote the thing, they were very happy when the when the change request came out, or pull request, whatever you call it, but it hasn't yet been implemented. So
I mean, all these solutions have their drawbacks and their advantages. For example,
Indeed.
Redis isn't, at the end of the day, or where it comes from, is an in-memory database. So you get near real-time performance with the streams. At the same time, I'm not too sure if, assuming that your main memory is actually limited,
Yep.
that the Redis streams would be able to scale as much as a full-blown Kafka installation,
Yeah.
because Kafka has partitions and all the rest of it that really supports scaling that
One of us
architecture.
that Kafka is sort of disk first, rather
Yes,
than,
exactly.
for example, right? So yes, those are important differences indeed. So, having talked about the differences, the history, where do we see this going?
Indeed. It's probably fair to assume that the end of the internet is near, as in it'll be,
Internet 2.0, yeah.
it'll be history in about 2 years' time,
Okay.
because nobody needs mobile devices anyway. I mean, as we all know.
Indeed, yes.
And nobody cares about the weather either, especially not predictable, accurate weather forecasts, because who really needs them anyhow? Especially if you're living in the UK, you always take a raincoat with you anyhow. Whether it's summer, winter,
umbrella,
autumn,
yes.
exactly. or spring.
Umbrellas also have multiple purposes, so they're a very handy thing to carry.
Yes,
yes,
exactly.
yes.
If they're bulletproof, they can shield you from drive-by shootings. That's one example, yes.
And in many movies they have been used for different purposes. Right?
Indeed.
From shooting bullets to hidden swords and stuff like that. But yeah.
Exactly. I mean, if they're sharp, if they have a sharp tip, you can also kill people with these.
Yes, but those
If you want to,
those
that
are not
is.
your standard umbrellas
Exactly.
and boots.
No, exactly.
We
No.
have no idea where to acquire these other ones, unfortunately.
That's the official version, exactly. For the details, the email address is... Anyway, okay, now going back, I mean, where do we see this going? That's a very interesting question, because jokes aside, this planet, and with it, its technology is converging by the minute, by the second, by the sub-millisecond, in terms of, yes, people have more and more
I would say
demand.
the opposite, anyway.
Okay. No, from a technical perspective now, because everybody is obsessed with will it rain in southern Birmingham, in the southern part of Birmingham City Centre tomorrow at 3 p.m.
They are?
Or
Okay. Well, there might be if they are
Well,
planning to do some outside swimming or
well,
such activities.
for Birmingham, the answer is probably yes. But
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
but I mean, jokes aside, if you're a farmer in the middle of nowhere, but you want to plan your day, you want to know whether it's raining tomorrow afternoon or not, because that will determine if you can do, for example, the harvesting or not. So accurate weather forecasts, especially locally, as in for your area, within few miles radius with a proper accuracy is become more and more important.
Yeah, well, you can even in the farming example, you can even further, because farming is becoming very, let's say, tree driven as well, and they will have sensors to measure the moisture in the crops to make sure that it's at the right level to be able to harvest, for example, as you say. But yeah, the more data you have, simply, which sensors provides, and I mean, it's not just farmers; it's also cars are riddled with sensors these days.
Absolutely, yeah.
Many purposes, and yeah, so
especially if you want to kind of get a car or use a car that does its own driving, so that you can safely go to the pub, get really legless, and then don't worry to have to order an Uber.
Well,
Uber, the email address is sponsor at linuxinlaws.eu.
Yes, we do appreciate Uber.
Yes. No, jokes aside, with these requirements from a technical perspective, that sort of technology becomes more and more important.
Ah, okay. That was right. Yeah, I thought when you mentioned that everything was converging, it's just, you see, from the way I see it, is that you get more and more technologies doing the same thing slightly differently, right? That's true. That's what I'm was referring to there.
But I mean, that's the nature of open source, right? You have choices.
Yes, choices between
different approaches.
Two Linuxes there are almost the same. Yeah, exactly.
Going back to a recent episode now.
Yes, indeed. Choice is good, yes.
Choice is good, yeah. That's one of the main traits
confusing
of open source, yes.
Some places, but... Okay.
So, speaking of choices, should we cover the boxes?
Ooh, boxes. We can do...
So, Martin, what's your box?
So my box is a movie this time, which is called Wind River. And in short, it is a rather harrowing tale of something that happened in an Indian reservation in the midst of probably Nebraska, that sort of area.
Before or after the zombie apocalypse?
It's a good question. I don't remember seeing any zombies, so
maybe they cut this out.
Probably before, yeah, probably before.
Okay.
But yes, it's very gripping, and it kind of also points out the nature of living in such an environment, having an impact on people's behaviours and choices and stuff like that you don't think about when you're living in the middle of a city in a modern country, right? That's, well, not that they're not modern in the US, but in a smaller, remote community where things happen at a much different pace and rate and reasonings, etc.
So I get the
It's a murder mystery.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Sorry, I was just referring what was
set in the snow. Yes.
Okay, so people get killed.
Many people get killed.
Okay, and then somebody tries to suss it out.
Yes,
and he or she get killed too.
Well, we couldn't really reveal this because
we can, but anyway,
because then it would be it's got some good actors in it as well. If that means anything, Elizabeth Olsen, Jeremy Renner. Anyway, they're good actors. So
okay,
definitely worth a watch.
You'll find the details of the Internet Movie Database link in the show notes.
And talking about reviews, it's got a 4.4 review out of 5.
Okay.
Since we were talking about reviews the other day, yeah.
Fair enough.
What about yours?
So my box is actually Who Gives a Crap. It's a
a
brand of toilet paper. What's the fun about this?
No, I thought you were going to go with Oh, Attic Brewery or whatever they call
No.
it. Brewery
It's,
Attic.
no. I came across this recently when I was actually visiting the UK, and it's actually a brand of toilet paper. And if you take a look at the closed roll, at the roll inside the toilet paper, as in this little cardboard thing, it actually reads who gives a crap. And I found this very peculiar.
It's not just the roll inside; it's also the wrapping around it and the boxes. Everything comes in this.
And they also have a website. Links will be in the show notes. That is quite funny to check out. If you,
But they also,
never mind if you're sitting on the loo or not.
yes. So yes, it's worth looking at because they are also very environmentally focused.
Yeah, it's all recycled material, right?
Indeed. Not the yeah. That's not good. That's not good.
We stop here, I think. Okay.
Cool.
With that, thank
yes.
you for listening. And see you next time around.
This is the Linux In-Laws.
You come for the knowledge.
But stay for the madness.
Thank you for listening.
This podcast is licensed under the latest version of the Creative Commons license, type Attribution Share Alike. Credits for the intro music go to Blue Sea Roosters for their song Solid Market, to Twin Flames for their piece called The Flow, used for the segment intros, and finally to Celestial Ground for their song Sweet Justice, used by the Dark Side. You find these and other ditties licensed under CC at Jamendo, a website dedicated to liberate the music industry from choking copyright legislation and other crap concepts.